Hello, all you textual deviants, and welcome to another episode of Two Creeps on a Skype Call. I'm Mark Will in Taipei.
And I'm Tim Poole, aka One Creep on Skype, aka Tomek B in St. Petersburg.
All right, well, we're both wearing green today, which means that our text is the Emerald Tablet. We're calling this episode As Above, So Below for reasons which we hope will become clear later. I realized that the emerald is my birthstone, so
Very
I guess
nice.
it's doubly appropriate that we discuss this text. And do you have any initial comments or impressions that you'd like to share? I feel like you were underwhelmed by it.
Well, I just want to say that I hereby disassociate myself from all viewers who came here looking for Graham Hancock content. I am no Graham Hancock, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Okay, well, interesting that you mention him because I recently read his Fingerprints of the Gods, and he suggests that of course, ancient Egyptian culture is an important topic in this book, and indeed in all of his work. And I should say I've had a copy of Fingerprints of the Gods for quite a while, but I never got around to reading it until, a couple of months ago. I'd watched many of his interviews and videos, and I'd seen the Ancient Apocalypse series on Netflix, but I finally read Fingerprints of the Gods, okay? And of course, ancient Egypt is a very important topic of that book, and he mentions among the other Egyptian gods the god of writing, Thoth. And he suggests that maybe this Egyptian god Thoth was actually a human. And he floats the idea that it's possible this human and his associates came from the lost civilization of Atlantis, and they traveled to Egypt, and they taught the Egyptians how to build and how to do astronomy and mathematics and so on. So that idea was bouncing around in my head when I came upon a video on one of my favorite YouTube channels, the Y Files, and that video was called The Emerald Tablet of Atlantis. And then a few days after that, I think you sent me the Cat Williams appearance on the Joe Rogan Experience, and during that 3 or 4 hour interview, he also mentions the Emerald Tablet. So I don't know if this is synchronicity or my cell phone was listening to, what I was watching, and so started making all these suggestions. But everything seemed to come together at once, and I decided, well, let's go ahead and take a look at the Emerald Tablet. Let's see exactly what this is. And today I found yet another video related to this topic, and this is from another favorite YouTube channel of mine called Esoterica. And I would say this is the best source, or at least video source, on the actual text of the Emerald Tablet and the textual history and so on. And that's what we'll be considering today. I've talked quite a bit, so I'll give you a chance to respond.
Okay, well, comment one is, yeah, I don't have any background nor much interest in this genre, if I'm allowed to call it a genre. I have massive respect for classicists like yourself. And I don't mean to be disparaging to someone like Graham Hancock, but overall, I would say some of these YouTube channels, yeah, it just goes into that conspiracy theory box that even aesthetically, it's like hokey to me. Like, it's not an aesthetic that I am attracted to. It's almost like cosplay. It just, or Dungeons and Dragons, just that's the vibe I get from it. Like balding guys with ponytails and, finding ways to enjoy their life in an alternate way. And I don't begrudge them that. It's just not where I prefer house music and a bit of Celine. Not Celine Dion, but the French writer. So yeah, it can also.
I thought you meant Celine Song, director of Past Lives.
Yeah, exactly. And even
Call
this aspect
back to episode 6 of season 3. This is episode 7 of season 3, by the way.
And again, there's like these, there's obviously space. Okay, what am I trying to say here? Joe Rogan's got this kind of one aspect of his show where he brings on a lot of guys like this, but it can quickly veer off into like an anti-intellectual space. I'm sure you would agree, where it's just more like fun mystery speculation rather than things that come off more scholarly. I mean, the video that you just referred to now, I appreciated that guy's approach. What is his name? Dr.
Justin Sledge on the Esoterica channel.
Yeah, so, but interestingly, like that link I watched, I think it was like a 38-minute video, and I was 28 minutes in, and he still hadn't even read a text, because he said, well, what's the point of us even dealing with a version of this text, considering there's numerous translations, none of which are definitive, none of which are authoritative. So it's like he seemed rather disparaging of this particular text simply because there was no agreed upon source material. So I just didn't even really know. Like I at least would like to work with text as someone who, who's steeped in creative writing and an interest in literature.
Yeah.
At least give me a text that we can play with and close read.
Well, if you'll bear with me, I promise I will do that.
Okay.
I've selected a specific text for us to consider, and let me just walk you through the textual history and give you some background information, and then we will actually engage with the text.
Before we do that, can you address any of my concerns about this genre?
Yeah, well, you said something about classicism. I mean, this is really more the purview of the medievalist, I would say, because the earliest versions of this text that we have are from, the 9th century of the Common Era.
Well, the earliest definitive versions.
Well, yeah, they may or may not be based on earlier Hellenistic versions, or if you believe the Graham Hancocks of the world, and I don't know that he specifically said this about the Emerald Tablet. I've not really found any video or writing in which he says much about the Emerald Text, or the Emerald Tablet, but maybe he would believe that these alchemical texts, or more generally the Hermetica, which we'll talk about, um, even if our versions are based on medieval or late Hellenistic texts, he would possibly argue that they go back, much earlier, like millennia earlier, and what we consider classical is actually, it actually dates back to the Egyptians and even earlier.
Okay, can I just take up a couple points from what you just said then?
Mm-hmm.
You said medievalists would traditionally tackle this text,
Mm-hmm.
but regardless, the text is attributed to this Hellenistic figure, right? Hermes Trismegistus.
Well, yes.
So it's still tied to classical periods of history, regardless of
Yeah.
when it emerged.
Well, yeah. And you had asked me in a text message to clarify this, so let me do that now.
Okay.
I'm glad you brought that up. That's the next slide. So, Hermes Trismegistus, which means thrice great Hermes, is a syncretic figure. I mean, he's not classical. He's not someone who would have been familiar to Plato, for example. He's late. He's Hellenistic, and he represents a synthesis of the Egyptian god Thoth and the Greek god Hermes, known to the Romans as Mercury. So you take Thoth and you take Hermes, you combine the two, and you get this, late Hellenistic character, Hermes Trismegistus. But you could say that Hermes and Thoth were sometimes considered the same person. And so, it's not that important to clarify all that. You can just think of Hermes Trismegistus as an analog of Thoth and or Hermes and or Mercury.
But perhaps you could clarify the chronology then for me as someone who does not specialize in history. I mean, when you're referring to the Hellenistic period, Wikipedia says that that's between the death of Alexander the Great in 323 BC and the death of Cleopatra the Seventh in 30 BC.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Isn't
so
that's pre-Roman or anyway Roman?
But it's after the classical period, right? And it may be that it's post Hellenistic, it's Byzantine. If you want to talk about the time of the Roman Empire, which of course was split into Western and Eastern, and the Western was basically Latin based linguistically, and the Eastern Empire was Greek based linguistically and culturally too, you might say, even though these things are all mixed up. And
Okay.
there's cross pollination.
I guess my only point then is given this is a medieval text, it's a medieval text that is wrapping itself in the language and the myth of ancient Greece and ancient Egypt,
Oh,
right?
absolutely, absolutely. And a lot of classical texts were transmitted to the West by um, Islamic scholars. For example, the a lot of the texts that we have of the Greek philosopher Aristotle, who, of course, was a tutor of Alexander the Great. So he was a student of Plato, so that's the classical period, basically. But then he himself tutored Alexander the Great, so he's kind of in that post-classical Hellenistic period. But then his texts survived in these Arabic translations, right? So the textual history is interesting, and there's not always a clear line of textual descent, I guess you could say. Like things are lost and things are translated and mistranslated, and you know they
Are you
the
suggesting that there
original.
might be some textual deviance?
There is some textual deviance for sure.
I
Yeah,
see. Thank you.
yeah. All right, so stop me if anything is unclear. Um, all right, so as I say, some people argued that this Egyptian god Thoth was actually a human, a person, known as Hermes Trismegistus, or as you can see in this slide, Hermes Trismegistus Thoth. So it's not that important to make all of these distinctions. You can think of them all as avatars of the same, person or god. And according to legend, it's true that even these late medieval texts um, attribute the authorship of the Emerald Tablet to Hermes Trismegistus, or Thoth, or Hermes, or some other equivalent characters that we'll mention in a moment. But um, the legend had it that someone, possibly Alexander the Great, possibly someone else, um, discovered the emerald tablet in a tomb. And in this tomb was the actual Hermes Trismegistus, or Thoth, or Hermes. Um,
Are you going to say all three names each time?
yeah, maybe. Which would you prefer? Hermes Trismegistus. Let's go with that. HT.
HT, yeah.
Yeah. So his corpse was found in this tomb, and the hand of this skeleton was clutching a tablet made of emerald, which, as I say, is my birthstone, and we're both wearing green to celebrate that fact. So this is a medieval illustration of that discovery of the emerald tablet. So there are various stories about it. Some say there was more than one tablet, um, but authorship is generally attributed to HT.
And I also heard that perhaps more than 30 writers were kind of using HT as their pen name. Did you hear
Well,
something like that?
um, that yeah, yes. I'm sure there were multiple occult writers, philosophers, alchemists who, assumed the persona of HT.
I just was wondering if there could be a modern equivalent, and because I couldn't really think of one
Oh, what? A
immediately.
modern equivalent.
Yeah, someone that we all choose to take the persona of and like sign off as.
Well, maybe not a modern equivalent, but some people argue that the Greek epic poet Homer was not one individual, but rather
Right.
a kind of, guild of rhapsodes or bards, and they all collaborated on the text, and it was just attributed to Homer. And we've talked before, in our very first episode of this venture, we talked about, textual issues with Shakespeare, like who was Shakespeare, and was it one individual? So I don't know, modern equivalents. I'd have to get back to you on that. I can't think of any offhand. But in antiquity and in the medieval period, there were texts attributed to various writers and philosophers, and sometimes they're.
I guess you could say an analogy could be God.
Author of
Like
the Bible.
Well, yeah, you like say that I'm writing with the Spirit of God. Like God is writing through me. Even rappers will say that, right? Like they'll say that I'm just opening myself up and I'm becoming a channel. So, or like the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him.
Well, I was just going to point out that sometimes you've got an author that everyone recognizes as the true author of a particular text, and then the prefix pseudo is added to the name because it's not, a text has been attributed to the real author, but it's suspected that the real author didn't write it, so it's pseudo whoever. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you used the term guild earlier to describe Homer, and I know that was quite common practice during the Italian Renaissance period, right? People would be working under a guild of someone like Michelangelo.
Well,
and then everyone would be like, yo, you're not really significant enough, but you can still sign like you were part of the crew or whatever.
Well, yes, or a student. Since we're talking visual arts now, like a student of an old master, let's say, might produce a painting in the master's workshop, and then the master's name
that's what I mean.
Right. The master will get credit, but really the work was done by a student. So that, of course, that happens.
Or I could just come and like, just touch
add
your
a little flourish.
Yeah, add a little flourish, or reshape the ear a little bit, and yeah. But I wonder, in this sense, if it was like, why a writer would choose to take on this HT pseudonym. Would it be because they really
it's authority or anonymity, right? Like maybe there was some conflict with the church. It's not considered orthodox, so you don't want to use your real name and get burned at the stake. So you just publish it.
Or was it like a pride thing? Like they loved this guy, or they loved this world that they were in, this like alchemy club, and that was like their big dog in their club. So
yeah, that too. It gives the text more authority, right? Like if their ultimate god
Authority is just a confusing word for me because authority, for me, suggests that other people respect it more. Where I'm saying it's more like homage.
Okay, that too.
I mean, I'm sure it's both and. I'm just saying that that's like the point I'm trying to
Right. Yeah,
emphasize.
I got it. Yeah. So anyway, I hope that was clear. According to legend, an actual tablet made of emerald was discovered in some tomb or some ancient site, and possibly it was being held by a corpse. Um, I think the first slide shows like a replica of that, and it's not clear what language it was written in. I mean, it looks, the replica looks kind of like Phoenician, which is interesting for another reason, but some say, well, it's a language that is unknown, and so it must be the language of Atlantis, Atlantean. But
Do,
but then
do, do, do,
but then it
do,
was
do.
but then it was, I don't know what that is, but then it
It's the
was
X-Files music.
oh, okay. Then it was transmitted to the Egyptians, and then to the Greeks, and then to the Arabs, and then to the Latin speakers, and then to the other European languages. So this is important because in my epic poem of Letters and a Man, I associate Thoth, Hermes Trismegistus with the culture hero Cadmus, and Cadmus as god of writing, inventor of the Phoenician and therefore the Greek alphabet. Um, he, I consider all of these other writing gods to be emanations of Cadmus, even though, chronologically he comes after Thoth. But I have my own personal mythology, as Blake says. I must create my own system so as not to be enslaved by another man's. But in my system, the ultimate writer god is Cadmus. And so I associate him with Hermes Trismegistus and Thoth and others, such as the biblical Enoch. I found this book earlier today. It looks great. It's called The Lost Pillars of Enoch, When Science and Religion Were One. And that's a theme or an idea that we'll come back to later. But on the cover of this book, you can see a figure holding the caduceus, the entwined snakes. This is a symbol of Hermes. And on top of his head is the alchemical symbol for Mercury, who, of course, is the Roman equivalent of Hermes. And so the biblical Enoch was associated with Hermes, Thoth, and so on. Cadmus, perhaps. And in the Islamic tradition, Enoch is known as Idris, not the actor Idris Elba, but this uh, wise man or prophet. Um, the biblical, the biblical Enoch is known to Islamic tradition as Idris. I really like this. It looks like a Sufi uh, painting.
I like the name Idris.
Idris. Yeah.
I've had Idrises before as students.
Mm-hmm. Were they wise men?
Idrisai. They were ignorance.
Sorry to hear that.
Imbeciles.
That's pretty harsh.
I just, yeah.
You know, you know.
Soothing
Okay,
you with our dead air.
yeah. You know, and dead air. Okay, so anyway, uh, as I say, the Emerald Tablet is part of this corpus of texts known as the Hermetica, and of course, as you can imagine, they're known as the Hermetica because they're thought to have been written by or inspired by Hermes or Hermes Trismegistus. And here's another book that I discovered today. It's called The Hermetica, The Lost Wisdom of the Pharaohs. And who's on the cover? You can see, right? Who is it?
Thor, or whatever.
Thoth. It's Thoth,
Oh,
not Thor. That's a different tradition. You're
my
confusing the
bad.
Egyptian with the Norse. But yeah, so there's Thoth, Hermes Trismegistus. He's on the cover of this collection of Hermetica, or, occult texts attributed to Hermes or Hermes Trismegistus. And it's thought to have been, you know, um, the lost wisdom of the pharaohs. So that precedes the Greeks, right? Like the Egyptians precede the Greeks. So what was Hermes or Hermes Trismegistus educated in Egypt or by the Egyptians? It's murky, it's not clear, but in my opinion, it's not important to sort all that out. We can just think of all of these figures as being basically the same. Thoth, Hermes Trismegistus, Mercury, Cadmus, Enoch, Idris, they're all different avatars of the same figure, basically. Still with me?
You're starting to sound like the Emerald Tablet.
Yeah, obscure and incomprehensible, right?
No, I was thinking more about the unifying principle.
Oh, okay. Thank you. That makes me feel better. All right, let's carry on here. So, um, I just want to point out, I mean, this is an alchemical text, right? We're talking about alchemy. It's occult, it's secret, but it comes out of the tradition of alchemy. And our word alchemy is from the Arabic word alchemia. And I learned today that that Arabic word in turn comes from a Greek word chemia. So that, if the Arabic word is derived from the Greek, then that suggests to me that um, probably these Arabic alchemical texts were derived from or translated from earlier Greek texts. And then those Greek texts in turn may have come from, who knows, Phoenician, Egyptian, or even Atlantean texts. How do you feel about that?
I think God probably just put them there to test our faith.
Hmm. Yeah, just like those dinosaur bones.
Exactly.
By the way, you visited Egypt recently. What was it, 2 years ago?
Yeah.
Can you, I mean, does any of this relate to what you saw when you were there? Like you went to Giza, right? You saw the
Yeah, and
Great
I went
Pyramid?
to a couple different museums. Egyptian Museum. I can't remember the other important one I went to, but I'm not gonna lie, like I'm just not drawn to this stuff the way I kind of would like to. Like I like the idea of being more interested in it than I am. The only thing that kind of resonates is when I was in Alexandria, I just learned at that time how they were fusing in Alexandria in particular, they were fusing the Greek and the Egyptian traditions, and so HT, made me think of that a little bit. How, yeah, just and we see stuff like that in other cultural traditions like Catholicism and Mexican pre-Christian cultures blending into the iconography of the saints and so on, or Dia de los Muertos,
Absolutely.
stuff like that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah, so it's just but I'm here to get excited about it through your masterful lectures. And your challenge is the same challenge that I have when I teach my year 10 students about Ozymandias, and I try to get them hyped.
Mm-hmm.
So my other very tenuous link, now that I mention it, is just learning something like the fact that Ozymandias was the Greek name for Ramses,
Yeah.
right? And I didn't realize that, and I don't know. It's interesting, like why was Shelley more familiar with Ozymandias as the name of Ramses? I don't know if you can tell me that, but
Yeah, because at that time Europe's knowledge of Egypt was mostly from Greek sources.
okay,
The like I don't think uh let's see. At that time, I mean, it was Napoleon that discovered the Rosetta Stone, right? And that was what enabled um scholars to translate the hieroglyphics, right? Because there were Greek texts on that stone translating the hieroglyphics, and so because they knew Greek, they could decipher the hieroglyphics. So it was around that time that knowledge of the original Egyptian um, language and the hieroglyphics was being sorted out. So I think he still would have had to rely on Greek sources for the most part, right?
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay,
So, but I think you probably got a feel for the cultural cross pollination
that's a
that
nice
was going
word. Yeah,
on, just by visiting Alexandria. And I don't know, maybe you saw it with your own eyes, or it's something you learned at the museums, but all of that stuff is mixed. I mean, you mentioned Cleopatra earlier, right? Who was she? Well, she was culturally Greek, right? But ethnically, she was Macedonian, as was Alexander, right? And the Macedonians are a Slavic people, but they adopted Greek culture, right? And then this ethnically Macedonian Greek speaking warrior um, invades Asia and conquers Egypt and goes as far as Persia. Um, so, of course, there's all kinds of um, mutual influence taking place, right? Like there are some Indian there's some Indian art that shows the influence of Greek art because of the conquest of Alexander. So, as we're talking about this, I'm thinking, like, why not? Why couldn't it be the case that these Arabic texts are based on much older Greek and or Egyptian and or who knows what text, right? Like, as you say, there will
Yeah,
be some
sure.
textual deviance and some mistranslations and interpolations and all kinds of textual corruptions, but there could be a narrative thread that runs straight through it from the earliest antiquity to today, even.
Right, or like the Christ narrative being repeated in different cultures, right? Something like that.
Well, yeah.
That's maybe a
I
bit
mean
of a
that uh, that's something that Hancock talks about, the Osiris myth, and their equivalents in uh, American civilizations, like with Quetzalcoatl. Okay, let's move on.
I want to get into the Emerald Tablet itself and
Oh,
kind of
yes.
see what speaks to you about it.
Yeah. Well, let me just give you a brief history of the text, and then we will look at one text in particular, an English version, of course. So there were various Arabic versions, right? We have alchemy. It's an Arabic word, and a lot of the early alchemical texts were written in Arabic, and some of them were translated into Latin, including this one, known in Latin as the Secretum Secretorum, the secret of secrets, and this dates to the 9th century CE. And it was an alchemical text, and one of many, there were various others, but this includes in its pages one version of the Emerald Tablet. So that was an Arabic version, which was then translated into Latin. And here we have a text called De Alchemia from 1541. And up at the top, the title says Tabula Smaragdina, that is Emerald Tablet. The full title is Tabula Smaragdina Hermetis Trismegisti. So you can see there it is attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, the Emerald Tablet of thrice great Hermes. In other words, Thoth, or Cadmus, Enoch, Idris, take your pick. So we've got this Latin version, and there were others before that, we may assume, but you had all these Arabic versions. They were eventually translated into Latin. And then Mr. Science himself, Isaac Newton. Remember him from your high school physics class? I mean, all of our understanding of physics before Einstein and Heisenberg and the quantum guys was based on Newton's theories. This British scientist from the 17th century, 17th and 18th, I guess. So he's a man of science, right? Well, what is science? Scientia. It means knowledge. And people like Newton, we mentioned that book about the pillars of Enoch earlier, right? When science and religion were one. Well, Newton seems to have embraced that idea that science and religion were one. He's the person responsible for Western science's understanding of physics and hard science, but he was also interested in alchemy, and the occult arts and thus religion. He looked for the philosopher's stone himself, and so he translated into English the Emerald Tablet, and that is our text today. We will read together Isaac Newton's translation of the Emerald Tablet.
So you're going to put a timestamp at 45:30, right? So everyone who watches us on YouTube can just skip the first 45 minutes and start here.
Yeah, just skip the and dead air and cut to the chase. I noticed that the formatting of my slides have changed. I created this in PowerPoint, and then when it converted to Google Slides, everything's jacked up. But hopefully, it's still possible to read all this. So,
can I ask one last note about Mr. Newton?
Yeah.
On one of these trailers to the videos you sent me, it kind of got you intrigued by mentioning that trying to find the source of this Emerald Tablet or the Philosopher's Stone or whatever alchemy it entailed was responsible for Newton's demise. Like, he went crazy about this. Do you know anything more about that?
No, I hadn't heard that. So his
it's just kind of funny
his obsession with the Philosopher's Stone led to his death, you're saying?
Yeah, or his madness or some iteration.
No.
So I hope the same fate doesn't wait for you there, Mark Will.
Oh.
I'm going to find you in 5 years just with a bunch of urine in your fridge and you're going to be muttering things in Latin.
Searching for the elixir of life.
Making that urine stone.
Which will
apparently it takes 8 years to form, so you better get started.
We'll get to that soon. Yeah, okay. I may not have 8 years. All right, so let's just take turns reading. I'll read this slide. You can read the next one. This is the actual Emerald Tablet, people, as translated from the Latin by Isaac Newton, who apparently lost his mind obsessing over such things. It says, "'Tis true without lying, certain and most true. That which is below is like that which is above, and that which is above is like that which is below, to do the miracle of one only thing." Now, this second line or verse is the basis for that formula, as above, so below, which is used by alchemists and also other practitioners of the occult, like tarot card readers. You can see in this slide a picture of the magician, one of the major arcana in the tarot deck, and you can see his right hand is raised and his left hand is pointing downward, and this is meant to be an illustration of the concept as above, so below, right? So like on earth as in heaven, as they say in the Christian
and just
tradition.
In addition, astrology as well.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yes. And, this is very much related to Hancock's theory in Fingerprints of the Gods. He basically says that, the complex of pyramids in Egypt was a model of the constellations at a particular time in history. Okay, so let's move on. I'll let you read the next one.
And as all things have been and arose from one by the mediation of one, so all things have their birth from this one thing by adaptation. The sun is its father, the moon its mother. The wind hath carried it in its belly, the earth is its nurse. The father of all perfection in the whole world is here.
Yeah, so you've got the, I don't know if you'd call it monism or almost a kind of monotheism, right? Like all the diversity that we see in the world is the result of the one, whatever the one is, some unifying universal force. But it manifests as the masculine sun and the feminine moon, right? The sun is its father, the moon its mother. And
I'm wondering about this word mediation because I saw in other translations that it's meditation. What do you make of that word?
Yeah, I saw that too. Like the instead of I don't know, in Latin it would either be meditatione or mediatione, or I don't know what case it would have been in the text, but probably something like that since it's part of a prepositional phrase. Um, Mediation makes sense to me because it's like the mediating force that operates on all the phenomena that we observe in the universe.
What does that mean exactly to mediate? I mean, I'm familiar with it as like mediating a conflict, right? You'd kind of, or you'd be the person in between.
Yeah, it's related to the word medium, right? So it's the thing that goes between, um, and in this case, it would be the force that I guess mediates between the one invisible Godhead and all of the phenomena of the observable universe, right? Like, how do you get from that invisible Godhead to the phenomena, the observable phenomena of the universe? There must be some mediating force which creates all of that.
But I mean, would you accept supervision as a synonym, or that would be too like concentrated, like power concentrated?
Supervision by
Yeah,
from one by the supervision of one. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, why not?
but it's a bit different, right?
Yeah, I mean, supervision is overseeing. Mediation
Right.
seems more active. So I would just go with the, what's probably the text. But let's consider this alternative reading meditation. Um, then it's kind of like by an act of will or an act of thinking, all of this takes place. It's not like a physical action of a creator God. It's just like a thought that becomes manifest. So
Yeah, although
that's nice
meditation,
too.
ironically, meditation is like a space of no thinking. So I
Yeah.
don't know, just to use that word is kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like meditation for me would be a more of a passive action.
Yeah.
It would be like sitting back and observing it rather than making it happen.
Well, you know, I'm thinking of this notion of the one and how, if it's true that all of the cultures of the world, have their source in these teachers that after the great flood, I'm hearkening back to these Hancockian theories. Like if there were after the great flood, which all cultures attest to in their mythologies, right? Like all cultures throughout the world have a flood myth. So
Even the fate of the Great Spaghetti Monster.
I don't know what that is.
You've never heard of that?
No.
It's like some spoof religion. But anyway, sorry, I don't mean to lower the level of our discourse.
Well,
No, but continue seriously, because I'm interested in what you're saying.
Well, let's say that this is true.
Flood myth.
There after some universal deluge, there were some survivors, and they were able to. They were seafarers, and they were able to travel around the world and teach other survivors, their culture. And so all cultures of the world have a common origin. If that's the case, then maybe this notion of the one manifested in Asia as the Tao, right? All things are the Tao. That's the one unifying force, and it took a different form. It kind of manifested as monotheism in the Middle East and later Europe. I don't know, but at the same time, we've got the sun as father and the moon as mother, or we might say yang and yin, right? Masculine and feminine energies.
And I guess the reason I keep harking back to this idea to wanting to explore, and the reason I'm rubbing my eyes is because I have allergies, by the way, just so you know.
It's not out of boredom.
Exactly.
At least there's no dead air.
We're trying.
Yeah.
Very much living air.
Yes.
So, but yeah, because this is interesting for me, whether it's an act of creation or whether it's something that's like always been here kind of thing, right? Like that's something that I guess is probably still debated, right? As far as the origin of existence. So even the word arise, right? As all things have been and arose, arising is different from being made. No? It's more like manifesting rather than producing.
Yeah.
It's different. It's more spontaneous. Okay.
Yeah.
End of my attempt to be profound.
Well, how about the wind and the earth? What about those elements? The wind hath carried it in its belly. The earth is its nurse. Any particular importance?
Well, the earth is its nurse kind of makes sense in the, like the earth feeds us, so it's like we suck from the earth's tit.
Mm-hmm.
I'll let you
suck
on that for a while.
The wind hath carried it in its belly, so the wind is pregnant, right, with this force.
Mm-hmm.
So the sun and the moon fuck, because the sun is the father, the moon is the mother, and then the wind becomes a kind of mother carrying it.
It's a surrogate
in its belly. Yeah, it's like what's that called?
Well, it's what the Russian elites do now, they'll hire some working class woman to carry their baby so that they can keep their bodies immaculate.
Oh my. IVF, that's what I'm thinking of, in vitro fertilization.
Yeah, but that would still use the same egg and sperm from the original parents generally. Like many people use IVF now, but using a surrogate is different.
True. It's like the handmaiden, right?
Yeah, or Brave New World aspects of that.
Okay,
Incubators.
And the earth is its nurse. The father of all perfection in the whole world is here. So we're back to the father kind of creator God. Let's see what's next. Its force or power is entire if it be converted into earth. Separate thou the earth from the fire, the subtle from the gross, sweetly with great industry. It ascends from the earth to the heaven, and again it descends to the earth and receives the force of things superior and inferior. By this means you shall have the glory of the whole world, and thereby all obscurity shall fly from you. Its force is above all force, for it vanquishes every subtle thing and penetrates every solid thing. So was the world created. That's pretty obscure. Although the separating of the subtle from the gross, that's very much an important concept in alchemy, right? Like one of its goals was to make gold from lead or from dross, right? Like you've got the gross and then you make something subtle out of that.
Yeah, that whole world of alchemy is very foreign to me, so I'm relying on you.
Well, but we've talked before about alchemy in a, I don't know, metaphorical sense of taking something worthless and transforming it into something beautiful. Like we talked about artistic alchemy,
Right.
Like you just have all of this junk, all of this garbage, trash, but you make something beautiful out of it through some sort of magical, mysterious, alchemical process. That's the artistic transformation.
Right.
So anything else? These lines are pretty obscure, these verses, but I don't know if there's anything you want to comment on.
Well, just that some of this seems like the passages that would really arouse the interest of these medieval alchemists. And they're there in the lab and they're like, okay, I gotta separate the earth from the fire, the subtle from the gross, and I don't know. I just, even this whole idea of the Philosopher's Stone is very new to me.
That's a pretty good line, isn't it? Separate thou the earth from the fire, the subtle from the gross, sweetly with great industry. That could be, I don't know so much about the earth from the fire part, but let's just take separate thou the subtle from the gross, sweetly with great industry. I mean, that is a nice formula for the artistic project, right? The aesthetic process.
I was trying to separate the subtle from the gross in my morning email to my grandmother. And I was doing it with great industry. True story.
I believe you.
Because, I'm sitting there penning this email and I'm thinking, okay, like I'm going to mention aspects from my life. And I've got like whatever the 10 dominant things are in my consciousness at any one time. And there's only certain ones that I enjoy recalling, So it's like I'm separating the wheat from the chaff.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of, I only want to share the stuff that I find aesthetically pleasing, that don't make me frustrated, that don't feel too like wallowed in, like, let's say office politics or something like that, right? I want to share some stuff that, so I have to quickly decide like which of all this like mind shit that I have is even worth sharing or has an element of beauty to
Of
it, you know?
course. Yeah, you
So
got to
yeah.
consider your audience. Like, what is grandma going to be interested in? What does she want to hear?
And what do I feel like dredging up?
Yeah. The wheat from the chaff, that is exactly the subtle from the gross. Sweetly with great industry. I like the phrasing of that. That's in addition to the as above, so below verse. I think this is my favorite so far. But what do we have? What do we have next?
From this are and do come admirable adaptations, whereof the means is here in this. Hence I am called. Do you want to say that name?
Hermes Trismegistus. He abbreviated it.
Having the three parts of the philosophy of the whole world. That which I have said of the operation of the sun is accomplished and ended.
I should point out that these symbols here represent fire, water, air, and earth, the four elements.
I thought you were going to say ejaculate.
Well,
So,
that comes later.
okay.
Literally comes later. Um, yeah, so the three parts of the philosophy of the whole world, what are the three parts? That's obscure. Is it just because Hermes Trismegistus, as he's referred to here, is thrice great? Is that what are the three parts? I don't know that that's ever been explained. But we go back to the masculine sun. That which I have said of the operation of the sun is accomplished and ended. Yeah, I can see how old Isaac went insane. If you take this too seriously, it's so obscure. You could really beat yourself up over it, right? Like trying to figure it out. What on earth? What does it mean? What does it mean? No. Oh, I think I
Right.
got it. Oh no, I don't. And then next thing you know, you've gone insane.
Yeah, but I mean, in the words of previous poet laureate Billy Collins in his introduction to poetry,
Mm-hmm.
I want them to water ski across the surface of a poem, waving at the author's name on the shore, but all they want to do is tie the poem to a chair with rope and torture a confession out of it. They begin beating it with a hose to find out what it really means.
Good point. Good point. Yeah,
So,
like why can't we just read it as poetry, music? You know, I would say, I mean, even with music, we want to, if it has lyrics, we want to interpret them in some way, but we don't need to insist on one particular interpretation dogmatically.
well, I think that's the thing that ultimately puts me off a bit of all this, like, weightiness that some of these conspiracy theories or Graham Hancock esque, and I hate using that term disparagingly, but there it is. You know, but the way they speak, even like as I was doing research for this, you know, you have Graham Hancock like bursting into tears at one point about, you know, how we've lost something, or so I just can't get into that whole narrative about like our elders, they knew the secrets, and we are in a fallen time where we're just taken over by industry, materialism, superficiality.
Well,
We've lost touch with the spirit. I can agree with
that's
some of those
pretty
sentiments.
convincing to me.
I can agree with some of those sentiments, but everything can be I also like appreciate critical thinking, and I would say that's another hallmark of modernity is just close reading and criticizing everything.
Well, we
And I
talked,
think ultimately I'm a bit more comfortable with that.
yeah. Well, we talked before about how this is the Kali Yuga, according to um, Hindu thought. Like this is the most degraded of all the eras, and I think the Mayans, according to the Mayan calendar, this is also like the apocalyptic time. This is a time of degradation,
Yeah,
and
but I'm skeptical of that because I know a lot of previous periods have thought of themselves the same way, you know.
yeah, well,
Really.
we're still well, but
So
the
it's like a
Greeks,
form of hubris, really.
yeah, like we're
Our time is exceptional.
exceptional because we're exceptionally evil. But I mean, the Greeks had like the golden age, the silver age, and so on, right? Like, of course, the version of that story, that myth that we have is after the golden age. So maybe it proves your point, right? Like no one ever thinks they're living in the golden age.
And I would just say that everything has two sides, right? So while we may have lost the connection to spirit, that would be the ugly side. The positive side is that perhaps we don't take ourselves that seriously, and that could be healthy, you know, because we are skeptical of everything because we've been given so much information that it's hard for us to believe,
Mm-hmm.
and we just give up and just decide stimulation is the way to go. Titillation, momentary, moment to moment titillation.
Followed
Sorry,
by ejaculation.
I like the word ejaculate. Somehow it came up on Curb Your Enthusiasm. I can't remember in what context, but I like it as a noun.
Mm-hmm.
Ejaculate. Sorry.
All right. Well, um, I just lost my earpiece. Um,
Do you know what I'm saying? Though, what do you think about that in terms of like the weightiness of like this this genre again? I'm gonna call it.
well, both and.
Okay, fine, fine,
It's
fine.
it's it's weighty and weightless. It's both.
It's just like any kind of ceremony, you know what I'm saying? Like even to join some kind of secret society, which some of this stuff is associated with, I wouldn't take myself seriously going to be inaugurated into some secret society where they act like, oh, now I'm joining something very important that dates back to. Again, that tone is just unappealing to me. That's my argument.
Well, yeah, you shouldn't take it too seriously. I mean, since
I mean,
you
would you like to
since
join
you
any secret society if you were
yeah,
invited?
maybe so, but I wouldn't take it too seriously. I mean, since you mention it, this is the one of the important themes of my book that I'm going to plug here, Earnest Games, right? Like it's earnest, it's serious, but it's also a game. It's a joke. So
Yeah.
you take it seriously, and at the same time you can be facetious about it. Everything.
So, which secret society would you like to join?
Well, I'll get to that in a minute. I'm
Okay,
gonna I have a slide related to that. I got a slide for everything, baby. So
that's gonna be our catchphrase.
yeah, we two creeps on a Skype call. By the way,
I got a slide for
by
that.
the way, yeah. By the way, Mr. YouTube commenter on our recent viral video, viral for us. It's not a Skype call, okay? This is Riverside, so just so you know. All right, so sometime around Newton's um, period of flourishing, um, different versions of the emerald tablet began to appear with this emblem. And I heard in one of the videos I mentioned before, probably the one from Esoterica, the emblem may have originated with Paracelsus. He's a famous alchemist. But those of you watching the video can see there's an emblem with a Latin phrase around the circumference of this circle, but there's also some astrological imagery. We've got sun and moon, or I guess that's sun and, yeah, that's sun and moon. So there's father and mother. And then in the middle there, I don't know if you can see that, but that is the symbol for Mercury, of course, in the middle. And then you've got Mars, Venus, and Saturn, and I think this is Jupiter here. But interestingly, the Latin phrase says visita interiora terrae rectificando invenies occultum lapidem. So this means, well, first of all, if we take the first letter of each of these words, right, we get the acronym vitriol, vitriol, which is sulfuric acid. And of course, that's, something that alchemists would have used in their distillation processes, I guess. But the Latin phrase means, literally, visit the interior of the earth. By rectifying, you will find the occult stone or the secret stone. And what do you think that refers to?
Boiling your piss.
Exactly. The lapis philosophorum, the stone of the philosophers, the philosopher's stone. I learned that this is the symbol of the philosopher's stone. You've got a small circle inscribed in a square, which in turn is inscribed in a triangle, which in turn is inscribed in a larger circle. And these four geometrical figures represent the four elements. I'm not sure which is which. The triangle is probably fire. Maybe the square is earth, and one of the circles is water and one is air. I'm not sure about that, but this represents this is the icon for the philosopher's stone. And as my co-host suggests, if you want to make your own philosopher's stone, well, you need to boil your piss. That's right, pee. So there was a recently published book called The Book of Aquarius, which is still available online, and there were some discussions about like the experiments people had done. Apparently the book, the subtitle is Alchemy and the Philosopher's Stone, published by Anonymous, right? And apparently its thesis was alchemy is real, the Philosopher's Stone is real, immortal life is real. Here's how to make the Philosopher's Stone. And it's basically a recipe, take your piss and boil it, distill it many times over. You got to save it, store it in the fridge. It has to be the right essence. I don't know. Follow the recipe. And then eventually you'll end up with a hard stone, which you consume. You eat it, and then you're granted
Do you suck on
eternal
it?
life.
Or...
Suck on the stone. I don't know. I think you eat it. I think you consume it one way or another.
Can I suck on your stone, or do I have to suck on my own?
Yeah, you're going to have to service yourself there.
Okay. So it only works if I suck on my own stone.
Yeah, I think so. You have to consume your own essence. So you have to distill your own essence, and then when you suck on it, as you so elegantly put it, um, you live forever. It's the elixir of life.
I think I'm gonna go with the anarchist cookbook instead.
That might be for the best. But those of you watching can see that the whoever took this photograph is showing us a red stone. I think the philosopher's stone is thought in its final form to be red, although at some stage it glows like phosphorus. But I think in its final stage it becomes red, and at one point it's black. But I don't know. I guess you can eat it when it's red, and then
All hail the watermelon Jolly Rancher.
live forever.
By the way, Jolly Ranchers,
Mm-hmm.
that's like one of the top candies, I think. Like, I haven't seen them since I was in America, but they really distill the flavor of each fruit in impressive fashion. Have you had Jolly Ranchers? Yeah?
I must have a long time ago. Maybe they underwent some alchemical process, some
Really, they're
distillation.
spectacular. And I hope that they're still in production because, especially the watermelon.
Mm. Well, the philosopher, maybe it's the watermelon Jolly Rancher is modeled after the philosopher's
I think
stone.
so.
We're really trivializing this topic,
I'm sorry, bro.
but
I'm sorry.
no,
I'm sorry.
it's an earnest
I'm levity, baby.
it's an earnest game that we're playing here. Should I plug it one more time? Earnest Games by Mark Will. Get your copy today. Oh, and the audiobook is coming soon, so stay tuned for that.
Nice.
All right, let's see. Now, all right, we talked about the PP. Why is that interesting? Well, I recently learned that the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn takes its name from, can you guess? Where do we get golden?
The golden shower.
Yeah, exactly. Golden is the PP, and dawn is the time of day that you get the best form of your essence through your urine. So I don't know if that's a joke or not, but what I heard, I think that was from the Y-Files video. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, it took its name from morning PP, Golden Dawn. And, this is an organization that included W.B. Yeats, Aleister Crowley, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, whose Sherlock Holmes stories I'm currently reading. I'm going to do an episode on A Study in Scarlet soon on the Books Are Burning podcast. This is volume 2. A Study in Scarlet is in volume 1. I'd never read the Sherlock Holmes novels or stories. Of course, I'd seen movies and TV miniseries and so on, but it's great. It's great literature. And Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was a practitioner of the occult and a member of the Golden Dawn. Did you know that?
I like the way your voice influctuated. What's the right word there? Kind of went up a little
Inflected.
bit. Inflected, yes. I like the inflection of your voice there at the end.
Did you know also that Sherlock Holmes was a coke addict?
I think I had heard that, yeah.
The second novel, The Sign of Four, it opens with Dr. Watson describing Sherlock Holmes shooting up. He takes his syringe and he injects himself, and then he zones out on the couch. And Watson asks him, "What is it today? Cocaine or morphine?" And Holmes says, "It's cocaine. Would you care to try?" And
Interesting.
Watson says no. But apparently, I mean, Watson says that he observed this.
That's why he's the doctor.
He observed this 3 times a day. So, start the morning right, like Sherlock Holmes. Do your detective work. You got got a shot of Coke in the morning, another shot at noon to keep you going, and then I guess you give yourself a shot of morphine to sleep. That's Sherlock Holmes. Creation of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, member of the Golden Dawn PP Club. So everything connects, baby. It's intertextuality. So I don't know. Have you enjoyed this? I should point out don't confuse the Emerald Tablet with this work called The Emerald Tablets, plural, of Thoth the Atlantean. This is written by a man whose pen name is Maurice Doriel. He claims that he astral traveled to Egypt. First, he claimed he traveled there, and then someone saw his passport and said, "Well, you've never left the U.S." He said, "Oh, I actually astral traveled there, and the tablets were revealed to me." But interestingly, he still claims that Thoth is the author, and he believes that the Egyptian Thoth came from Atlantis, as Graham Hancock seems to suggest as a possibility. He doesn't say this definitely happened, but he says it very well may have. And so everything has now come full circle. We started with Graham Hancock talking about Thoth the Atlantean, and then here's a not plagiarized, but a fakery called the Emerald Tablets of Thoth the Atlantean. Or maybe it's just fantasy. You can read it however you will. This guy, by the way, Maurice Doriel, started his own church. He's kind of an L. Ron Hubbard type character. But I should also point out that there's some other 20th century figures that were very much influenced by the Emerald Tablet. You have the spiritualist Madame Blavatsky, who, conducted seances. You've got the surrealist Andre Breton, and you've got the psychoanalyst, psychotherapist, psychologist Carl Gustav Jung. All of them interested in alchemy and the Emerald Tablet. So,
not a bad club to belong to.
Yeah. All part of the PP Club, the Golden Shower Club. Find your local...
Trump is also a member.
Find your local chapter. Oh, for sure,
Trump got it. He got initiated on his trip to Russia.
Exactly. All right, what's the next text, Tomek?
Potential next text is one that's...
Are we going to do another poll? Should we ask the viewers what they want us to...
that type of poll. When you said that, like, as a half poll, I think, like, which polls have we already... I'm thinking, like, which Polish people, Going through my list of well-known polls.
There are other meanings for poll, too.
It's true. Well, one thing I've been wanting to do, but I want to do it justice, so it might be best to deal with it when I've got at least, like, a week to really focus, but I'd like to discuss the smartphone and just how it's affecting life.
Oh, God. Yeah, that would be a good one.
So we definitely have to address that at some point. But we'll keep that as the tentative, and maybe we'll leave some space for whatever inspiration may hit in the next week or so.
We can do that. We can pull that together in a couple of weeks.
Okay,
the smartphone.
Then let's do it.
The next text is the smartphone, the bane of our existence. Or is it our salvation? All right.
It's true.
Thanks for joining us. This has been Texting, Season 3, Episode 7. I hope I got the numbers right. Subscribe to us on Substack. I'm at markwillwright, WRITE.substack.com. My co-host is at tomekb.substack.com. And be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel. That's at Mark Will Write, Write. Hope you enjoyed our presentation of the Emerald Tablet. Read it yourself. Let us know what you think in the comments or on Substack or whatever. Send us a message alchemically, telepathically, or however you choose to communicate.
As above, so below.